Good morning, everybody. A lot of friendly faces, and certainly appreciate the warm welcome. Thank you, Commissioner. I first want to commend certainly the Board of County Commissioners for this establishment of the Sustainable Task Force. But, you know, as it's been well stated earlier on, special thanks to Commissioner Hess and her vision and leadership in really carving out what is an important matter for not only Indiana County, but, you know, certainly our country and certainly the Commonwealth. But, you know, this is something that we all as citizens of one planet should really learn about. So kudos and congratulations. And thank you to each of you as the county's executive director of the Office of Planning Development. I sincerely appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this effort over the last year, and I will tell you the small role that we will play, and again want to thank Jeff and his leadership, and Josh and Dan and you know, Kayla, who was a former intern of ours, and you know, the stewards of this information and what we'll intend to do with it along with each of you. I certainly look forward to. My office also serves staff to the Indiana County Planning Commission, and Laurie is chair. And I'm sure we'll have many conversations around the table of, you know, you can do a report, do a document, do a plan, but, you know, until you start implementing it and putting forth some of the recommendations, that's when it, you know, you guys have done the hard work, and we're going to have the fun task of how we move this forward collectively. And again, glad to be part of this whole endeavor. Really a great panel here this morning. You know, and you know, hearing all the talk about economic development and workforce. One of the things that we intend to do with this, and you've heard about the Indiana County Center for Economic Operations. You know, and the county's been fortunate enough to secure some resources to be able to take this document and many other ideas around the county and begin the process of doing an economic and workforce development plan, of which this document will be a key part of. Also, I did want to acknowledge the good work that Jim Struzzi and Joe Ruschini with the Chamber of Commerce is doing. Kind of behind the scenes with our business community. I see some of those businesses here in the room, as well as our educators, and coupling up, you know, what some of the challenges are in the workforce. And we do have many. Southwestern Pennsylvania has many, with regard to finding skilled labor. And certainly when you get into specialized areas such as sustainability and energy and those kinds of things, you know, we do have some work to do, but I'm sure we're going to be up to the challenge. So I want to thank Jim and the Chamber and their leadership. And this was part of a long-term discussion. I know Commissioner Ruddock has talked for many years about the challenges with workforce and education and the business community. So, again, you know, Commissioner has been great to bring some of those issues forward, and we're trying to put those into place. Just very briefly, I know want to get to the keynote, but it was talked about with the urban announcement yesterday. And what I'm very excited about, given some of the building products, sustainability kinds of things, it is my understanding in talking with urban and their leadership that they are a very forward-thinking company. And it's going to be very fun to watch what they do. I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be a fully LEED certified to whatever standard, but I will tell you a facility of the scale of an excess of 100 or 800,000 square feet, they're going to be very cautious about what their energy consumptions are and how that building will be constructed. I trust in them now having ownership of nearly 50 acres of Indiana County prime property, that they will be good stewards of it when it comes to stormwater management. And certainly not wanting to cause any harm or inconvenience to anyone. So that's going to be a fun project to watch, and look forward to seeing that go up. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit more of a personal thing. You know, we talked about the youth earlier, and you know, I've been planning director 19 years. I've been with the county about 23 in total. And so when my daughter, when I started here, she was 10 months old. She's in graduate school now at Bowling Green University. And she graduated from W&J this past spring and got this grad assistantship. So she's, 300 miles away. And looking forward to see her come home this weekend. But she graduated with, she's in the program for public administration, but her concentration is sustainability. They have an accredited program in sustainability, and so she actually listened to what I was saying around the dinner table. So that accomplishment for my wife and I. And then my son, he's a sophomore at Penn Tech, and he's in a 4-year construction management program. And he's also very interested in good building products. So kids do listen, and if you talk to them and point them in the right direction. So again, thank you for allowing me to make a few brief comments. But I do want to welcome Scott Sheely. Very impressive gentleman here. Just had the chance to meet him, but I did read up on him earlier, and I'm getting a little older, so I do need to put these on. Mr. Sheely is Special Assistant for Workforce Development, Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture since spring 2015. He was formerly the Executive Director of the Lancaster County Agriculture Council, and Workforce Investment Board in Lancaster, PA. So I think you guys have picked an excellent keynote speaker given the topic matter today. He is a doctoral graduate of Penn State University in lifelong learning and adult education. He also has a Master's of Science in Counseling from Wright State University, a Master's of Divinity from United Theological Seminary, and a Bachelor's of Science in Government from Franklin and Marshall College. Scott is a certified workforce development professional. He is also an ordained United Methodist minister. Very impressive gentleman. So I welcome Scott and look forward to his presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the kind comments. Good to be with you here in Indiana County today and bring you greetings from my boss, who is Secretary of Agriculture, Russell Redding. Russell is still engaged in going to all the county fairs around the state. So he is just going crazy. He would like to have been here. He was just not able to schedule-wise. And so I'm happy to fill in and really speak to a little bit more specifically about some of the issues that you were raising. I did have the chance to sit in a little bit of the conversation earlier, and I think we're going to be talking about some of the same kind of things. What I would like to do is I would like to give you a little bit of more of a maybe 20,000-foot view of not only what's happening around the Commonwealth, but also what's happening around the country. Because many of these issues that we're experiencing here in Pennsylvania are very similar to what we see with our colleagues as we're out and around. Over the last 3 weeks, I've had a chance to be at the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. So all the departments of agriculture across the country get together. What do you think was the number one topic? A little more specific. Workforce. It's all anybody wanted to talk about was workforce. And, we'll kind of break that down a little bit, but loud and clear. And, of course, that's where Secretary Redding brought me on board, is really to deal with the issue. We'll talk a little bit about what are we doing, what are some positive things, and more importantly, what can you do? Because that's really what this session is all about. It's how do we begin to do some things locally that move us to the next level. Several weeks ago, I was at a what they call a super cluster meeting, where basically people around the country, states primarily, who are working with bigger groups than just states, so multiple states coming together to begin to think about how do we actually mobilize, bring things to scale so that we can do bigger things. What do you think was the main topic at that one? Well, that was sort of the second one, but it's another one that you just talked about this morning. Broadband. Huge, huge. We got to see what Purdue University was doing with actually bringing broadband into agronomy. Growing stuff and monitoring it with little chips that actually decompose and fade away, but give lots of information while the plant is growing. Fantastic. But once again, the same problems we're having here in Pennsylvania, we heard over and over and over again from other states around the country. And then just earlier this week, I had a chance to be with a group called the Association for Career and Technical Education. These are the people that run your career and technology centers and are involved in state conversations. But there was a pre-meeting, and what this was about it's with a group called NOCTI, who are the people who actually certify tests that are offered in career and technology center. What do you think they were wanting to talk about? Yep, workforce. But specifically, is there a way we can train our workforce so that we begin to think about some alternatives to formal education? Because not everybody needs to go to college. And there may be ways through apprenticeships, micro-credentials, a whole variety of other options that are out there that we could look at, to begin to accomplish this task that's in front of us. So it's been kind of an interesting month. A lot of different perspectives. I'm going to try to talk about a little bit of that as we go through this. My wife always tells me to stick to my outline, my PowerPoint, because otherwise I'll just go rambling off. So I'm going to try to do that, but I also am a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you some stories as well. We'll see if we can make that work together. It would really help me to know who's out there. Education of any variety. Any farmers? Hey, thanks for coming. Economic development people? Other government folks? Who else? Hey, we like you advocates. Realtors, wonderful. Students, media, cool. Manufacturing, glad you're here too, because don't forget that agriculture, and I'm going to be talking about agriculture, but agriculture is a system. It's not just growing stuff. It's people who process it, who distribute it. It's people who cook it. It's people who bring it to supermarkets and that kind of thing too. So, we want to make sure that as we go into this topic, we have that pretty clear in our heads that we're going to be talking about the ag and food system. This is something that Secretary Redding has been advocating as he has come into office here and we're finishing in the end of our first term, that we begin to think more systemically. And so that's going to be another piece of what I'm going to be talking about today. How do we do that? All right, so let's see. This way. Okay. So the problem right now is that when you do these kind of talks, it can get fairly negative, and I'm going to try not to do that. But let's just go through the list a little bit, and maybe you can even add to this. By the way, do you have a piece of paper? Could you take out the piece of paper? And as things come up, we're not going to take questions during, but would you write stuff down that you want to ask? Because we're going to make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A. So if you would do that, that would be really good. Okay, thanks. So agriculture today has lots of challenges. And again, some of this stuff has been in my head here the last couple of weeks because we just deal with this constantly. Most of you know that the dairy industry, which is one of the largest parts of the agriculture sector in Pennsylvania, is really in crisis for a variety of reasons. There's too much milk. Prices have gone down. There's too much supply, and we're trying to figure out, how do we deal with that? It is a consumer demand issue, but it's also an issue of diversification. So that's kind of out there on a lot of people's minds. The symptom of this is we see just so many people getting out of the dairy business. Dairy herds being sold off, dairy farms being sold. It's a big problem. Some of you saw that we did address that through a dairy plan that came out here in the last 4 to 6 weeks. So, I mean, it's something we're working on a lot, and we have a lot of concern about. The other part is that we're very concerned about what the harvest is going to bring this year. Commodity prices are just going to get creamed by tariffs. And the markets overseas are going to be real problematic, and just what happens with all that just remains to be seen. And, you know, this is a national issue. At the state, we don't really have a whole lot we can do about that, but we are concerned, and we're trying to follow what's happening nationally. We're trying to make sure that a farm bill gets passed, for example, which is being held up right now in Congress. Can't agree on farm bill. Come on. You know, what's the matter? Anyway. Water quality problems, particularly in the eastern part of the state, are just constant. The agriculture community in the Susquehanna River Basin are just hammered, blamed in terms of the pollution that's happening in the Chesapeake Bay. And almost everything that we are doing is just, it has to have this environmental overlay to begin to be addressing some of those issues and concerns from our neighbors in the Chesapeake Bay region. We have great concern about the fact that lots of people are leaving farming. The governor, in his kind of overall priorities at the beginning of the term, basically said this issue of farming leaving Western Pennsylvania is huge, and that we have to find some way to address that. And hopefully, you know, one of the reasons I'm here today and one of the reasons you're a part of this group is to help us do that. But so many people they're taking their mineral rights check and saying goodbye. And there's the farm, you know, no succession plan, you know, no way to figure out how to pass that on in some way or another. And again, we're very concerned about that. Okay. Yeah. There we go. And again, this problem of when people leave farming, there's no succession plan. There's people out there who would like to get into farming, but nobody has quite figured out what's that mechanism for actually allowing people, younger people who may be burdened with student loan debt, a whole variety of other issues, how are they able to afford that? And I think that's another big nut to crack. Finding people to work in the ag and food business is difficult and getting worse. I was at the Lancaster County Agriculture Council meeting yesterday, and one of the larger dairy farms in the county, the owner was telling us about how their farm was raided by ICE. And one of their longtime employees, who, yes, was illegal, but who was scooped up in the raid. And all kinds of issues that come out of that whole thing. The big problem we have, I mean, that's kind of the outward piece, but the big problem we have is that people from foreign countries who would have come to work here as temporary workers aren't coming anymore. Well, who can blame them? You know, I don't want to sit in jail for 6 months, you know, because of immigration problems. Huge, huge issue. And as one of your speakers earlier said, we project that there are going to be 75,000 job openings just in agriculture and food, just in Pennsylvania, over the next 10 years. And when I look at the numbers, the supply numbers of where we get people, there's a massive gap. What are we going to do? So, I mean, it comes up over and over and over again. Workforce it's on everybody's lips as we go out and we talk to people out in the Commonwealth. So you kind of highlighting that in your group, you know, you're right on. You know, on top of everything else, we have this thing called the spotted lanternfly that landed over in Berks County, came from abroad, and now is spreading all over the eastern part of the state. And it gets in and it destroys wood. Well, guess what? A little further west is one of the largest fruit growing areas in the country. What if it gets over there? What about our hardwoods, you know, up in the northern part of the state? It's a huge problem. And, you know, we're spending an awful lot of time on trying to resolve that. And really, isolate that if we can, but it keeps marching forward. So again, lots of issues that way. And I guess the other thing that bothers me, and okay, I'm just going to talk to you right now, okay? So people, and I'll just leave it at that, people routinely say that, well, you know, agriculture and food is the largest industry in the state. And then they routinely ignore us in terms of any kind of prioritization of funding, you know, whatever. What about that? I mean, isn't that kind of crazy? And, you know, so, I mean, I think what has to happen is what you're doing here is that the support for agriculture really has to come from the grassroots. It's groups like this that need to rally around and say, look, we get this, that it is one of the biggest industries in the Commonwealth. It is one of the biggest employers. And, you know, if we don't solve these problems, we are going to lose our economic vitality. And, you know, when industry goes away, here's the thing, it doesn't come back. So, you know, we're at a crossroads right now. So anyhow, at that point, I'll put a cap on my wine and won't do that anymore. But I think there are some answers out there, and that's what I'd like to talk about the rest of the time. I'm going to really talk about these things and try to do it briefly. And we want to make sure that we have some time for questions here. But there's a bunch of stuff that I think we can begin looking at as kind of like general solutions. Obviously, that has to drill down more than this. But this at least kind of points us to some ideas that we might be able to look at. So diversification is one. The other thing is that we can't be in a place in agriculture where we just produce food. We have to actually understand where it's going and who the people who are buying it really want. So understanding markets, you know, is very, very important. The other part is, as we begin to think about local needs and all the rest of it, as we begin to have newer people come into the marketplace or into the production end of things, we also, I think, have to think about how do we collaborate to come to scale. It's not enough that we have dozens of people doing things. We need hundreds of people. We need thousands of people to come together. Because when Giant Eagle wants to buy from you, they need to make sure that it's in sufficient quantities to fulfill their needs. And by the way, you also have to be GAP certified to be able to do business with them, and you have to have a certain kind of insurance. But they will buy from you. So how do we organize things and begin thinking a little bit differently? You know, this regulation thing, regulations aren't going to go away. I'm just resigned to that. I believe agriculture needs to be much more proactive about regulation. Let's find a way to work with it. Let's find a way to get it done. Let's find a way to do it together and share our knowledge and all the rest of it. So I'll talk about each of these a little bit more. This thing about succession planning is huge. This is a massive problem waiting to be solved. And everybody says, well, you know, we could have our lenders look at this, and we could have some education attached to it, and we could do this and we could do that. Okay, let's do it. Nobody's doing it. Or they're doing it just really little. I exaggerate sometimes, just to let you know. Again, as I said, the workforce shortage is massive. And I mean, I work at this every day, and I don't know what we're going to do. I think what we have to do is just chip away at it, but it's going to be a big problem. The problem is if we don't find the labor here, the labor will come in the form of things that we have to import from abroad. So it's like pay me now or pay me later. So we're going to have to get that figured out in some way or another. And then I go back to this slogan, and you may realize from things that I say that I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So this thing, remember the slogan, think globally and act locally? That just keeps coming back to me. That we have to, if we're going to do anything, you know, at the local level, we have to understand the context. And if there's, you know, one thing that I want to leave with you today, I think that's it, that we have to figure out where do we fit into these bigger systems that are out there and find ways that we can actually, you know, use that, to leverage the things that we need for our local areas. We have to understand the bigger context. All right, so I'm already out of time. Not really, but let me just quickly go through some things. Going back to each of those topics. All right, so diversification. I talked a little bit about dairy. We have a dairy plan. A lot of the dairy plan, has anybody seen the dairy plan? I mean, if you're interested in that, that's something I can provide to you. But a lot of the dairy plan has to do with how can we take the fact that people are not drinking fluid milk, and how can we have other dairy products that they will drink or that they will eat or consume. So a lot of that is oriented to how can we find other kind of value-added ways to deal with dairy products. And there is actually some grant money that's been put out there to do that. There was some state money, and there's also some of the money that came out of Washington that will allow for that kind of innovative thinking in terms of how do we develop new product. And I think that's all great, but diversification also means that we can't be single product producers anymore. You can't just be a dairy farmer. You have to have some other kind of things that are out there. And there are some good market opportunities that people oftentimes just don't want to consider. I'm working with 2 weeks, there's going to be in Lancaster County, I'm working with the Ag Council down there, who decided at the beginning of their Ag Week they would actually have an Ag Alternatives Conference for farmers. So a panel in the very beginning, 12 different speakers, many of them from our friends at Penn State, who are going to talk to people as they kind of make their way around the room about here's the opportunities that are out there with goats, one of the fastest growing proteins in the country right now. Good prices also. Not right now, but there will be again. They're going to talk to people about hemp, new crop coming back. People are trying to figure out what to do with it. Could that be a crop that you could grow as a cash crop in addition to your dairy operation? We need to have people, thinking about those kind of things. Ducks, new grains. Guess who is the top organic vegetable producer in the country? No, it's not Pennsylvania. It's California. But guess who's number 2? Pennsylvania. So people out there in the production marketplace have already figured it out that that's what those people in the big cities want to buy. They want to buy organic. And, that is happening in terms of people making the transition. PASA, the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, has really been a leader in that and has lots of resources that are available. I mentioned hemp, small flock poultry. You don't necessarily have to be growing poultry for Purdue and Tyson, but you might be growing poultry for your local market. I mean, I remember as a kid going to market in Lancaster, and there were the birds laid out on ice. That's what we're talking about. Where can you get that today? From local sources. That's what people want. So, I think this whole idea of diversification is really, really important. Don't forget also that urban agriculture and the pieces that go with that is another part of what's going on. It's small, it's tiny in terms of the total production, but in certain areas where there are food deserts, folks who are growing produce, whatever, in urban gardens are making a real impact. We work regularly with as many as 200 to 250 urban gardens in Philadelphia. There are not quite as many in the Pittsburgh area, but we're very involved with them, trying to understand the fact that urban agriculture is, yes, it is about production of agricultural product, but it's also about community building. It's about being meaningful. It's about filling these shortages that people have in terms of good food. A different twist to it, but it's still a part of that whole agriculture and food scene. And now here's another story, and this relates to the workforce. So I've been working with the agriculture industry, and I've also been working with the high school system in Philadelphia. There's a high school in Philadelphia called Saul High School. And Saul has 325 kids who come from all over Philadelphia. It's a magnet school. To come to Saul High School, which is an agriculture high school. From grade 9 through 12, it's all agriculture. It has a farm right across the street. So I know that they're there. And about 35 miles to the northwest, there is also one of the largest mushroom industry in the country. These guys over here are having an incredible workforce problem. These people over here can't find work. And I'm thinking, what's the problem there? Well, the transportation system doesn't go out there. Come on. You can solve that problem. Why can't we make that connection? And some of that is that the employers don't reach back into the schools, and the schools don't reach out to employers. So, there's an example. That's an exaggerated example, but it's the same kind of thing that we find in schools in general. We have to diversify our markets. We have to look at, other opportunities that may come along. Oh, I'm going to try to move faster. Too many stories. The other part is we have to understand the customer. The young consumer out there these days is way different from people my age. I just go to the grocery store, and go to my food co-op and, do all that kind of thing. Younger people really think differently about food. They want to know where their food comes from. They prefer to buy, and I'm exaggerating, just say it. They want to buy local. They want their food to be traceable. We have people who have apps that you can take your lamb chop and you can actually trace it back to where the lamb was grown and who its mom and dad were. If you want to be sitting at the table and you want to be doing that, that's fine. That's not me, but that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. People want to be much more close in with their food. And these buying habits actually have to come back, and we have to think about those when we're in the midst of talking about ag production. So why is there a glut of milk? Because people aren't drinking it. Because people are drinking almond milk, which isn't milk. Why do we let that happen? Why don't we say something about that? Who has ever eaten goat here? More than I thought. Goat is one of the fastest growing proteins, and ethnic communities are just, they can't get enough. The price of goat keeps going up. Can we get people down in the southwest part of the state that's been the traditional sheep area to grow goats? No. But we're trying. This is all consumer demand. Organic produce, that's why Pennsylvania is number 2. It's because the customers want it. So, understanding a little bit more about the marketplace is really important. The other thing is that, I think there's this kind of tradition of the farmer standing alone. Yeah, I'm going to be way over, just so you know, okay? I'm just telling you. But not way over, okay? I think we need to collaborate to bring to scale. The thing I mentioned earlier about Giant Eagle really wanting to buy, but they need to do it in a certain way. Food has to be aggregated. It has to meet food safety standards. It needs to have all those pieces together. And those are things that we can do together. So if they require GAP certification, good agriculture practices, that's what GAP means. But it's a thing, it's a certificate that you have to get and all the rest of it. And one producer meeting, we asked, how many of you have GAP? And of course, nobody raised their hands. Well, that's something we could do locally. We could get GAP workshops going and get people certified and help them through that process. If that's one of the barriers to selling at a bigger scale, well, let's figure it out. Let's do it. The food hub that I'm working with, that's based down at Republic Food Enterprise Center down in Fayette County, is actually working with people in West Virginia. And the logistics problem of getting food from southern West Virginia up to Republic Food and then into the Pittsburgh food shed, it's a transportation issue. It's a logistics issue. So can we figure that out? Can we figure where there needs to be a storage place along the way? Can we figure out routes that we could work together and everybody knows kind of where they can drop off and that sort of thing? We've got to quit doing this one-off thing that we have been doing for years and years and years. We have to think about, how do we do this together? How do we think systemically? How do we take action together? I think what we're going to see is that we have some data, some research being done right now, which is actually due on Monday. But what we're going to see is that there is not enough local food to meet the demand for local food. And I think we're going to prove it in the data that comes out, and it will be reported out next week. So how do we fill that gap? We fill it by thinking about how to do this together, and we do that better. So, everybody hates regulations. But, there's just certain things that are inevitable. The food safety regulations are here. You have to do food safety. You have to be involved in that. GAP is one piece of that. GAP is phasing into some other, certification. In the immigration area, everybody's been resisting E-Verify as a way to connect their employees in a legal way with the Homeland Security people and all the other folks that are involved. Why do we keep fighting this stuff? Let's just be proactive and let's get it done. Let's just get ahead of it. Together, we could actually work on some ways to make that happen. So let's work together to write the plans that need to be written. Let's figure it out. You talk about things that you could do locally. This issue of dealing collaboratively with regulations, I think, is a big one. I'm working with a smokehouse. Anybody know Berdini's? Working with them. They want to expand their operation, and they want to have a slaughter facility. This is one of the huge problems that we have throughout Pennsylvania. We want to grow local meat, but that we don't have anybody that'll process it. So we had a meeting the other day where we brought people from the U.S. Department of Agriculture who do the inspections for these kind of facilities. They brought a book that was this thick. And, as we sat there, we're saying, isn't there any way to make this simpler? And luckily we had one of the professors from Penn State who was there, and he has a lot of that in terms of the food safety piece. So, that was a help, but it was clear that we need, a better way to do this. I can tell you of places all over the Commonwealth where this gap in food processors, particularly meat processors, it's right there. Many producers are waiting 3 to 6 months to get their animals processed. You can't do that. The production cycles are such that, you have to process them, when the time is right. So what about that? What about your local meat producers? Do they have the outlets? I don't know your situation here, but my guess is that you're pretty much the same as other areas. You could probably use some more meat processing. Anyhow, we've identified that as a goal, is to address that. I'm not going to say a whole lot about this. I get too mad when I talk about it. It's like, why can't we figure this out? There's people who have land. They have nobody else in their family that they're going to pass it to. There are people out there who want to do this. They don't have the money. So can't we figure out a way that we can make a good investment, to be able to transfer the land and keep it in agriculture and move forward. While there are resources nationally, FSA, small business, and all the rest of that, the dollars to do this really, I think, this has to be resolved locally. You folks have to figure this out. And this is going to take some lenders and some people who kind of push this kind of issue in the economic development world. These are the ways that it's going to get done. So I'll be happy to help anybody who has a good idea about this, but we need some good ideas. And again, looking for a place where you can kind of dig in and address this, I think, is really important. Yeah. All right, so this is what I was actually hired at the department for. So this workforce shortage is just incredible. I mean, I can't begin to tell you. Again, the 75,000 new jobs. I mean, when I go into audiences, even in the ag world, and I ask people to name 5 ag and food jobs beside farmer, people just don't have any idea. The Ag Explorer website, which is a product of FFA, lists over 225 jobs that are specifically in agriculture. Why don't we know about that? Why don't our teachers know about that? Why don't we talk about career pathways into all these jobs in agriculture? Why not? And let me just tell you this, I love FFA and I do a lot of liaison work, but ask your FFA chapter sometime how many kids that leave FFA actually go into an ag and food job. And what you'll probably get is somebody looking at the floor. We need to do a better job of converting the good work that's done in FFA in high schools into people who actually pursue agriculture and food careers. We have a lot of other issues too. This problem that we have with immigration is just massive. And you know, again, it's a federal problem, but we are trying to do what we can to support people. The other thing that we've been looking at is that we're very concerned about, particularly with middle skilled jobs. These are the technical jobs that are out there that are being reinvented by technology. We believe that, well, let me ask you this. So if you want to train to be a agriculture equipment service technicians, so you want to be a person who works for a farm equipment dealership and works on the big machines that have 7 computers on board and that have GPS and that manage big amounts of data, how many schools can you go to in Pennsylvania to get the training that you need to do that? How about none? The nearest school you can go to for formal education is in New York. So, you know, we have heard the equipment dealers coming to us and saying, what about that? So we're working on an apprenticeship that the equipment dealers can actually sponsor, and this is in the works. This is almost done. So that people could train on the job. They would be hired as apprentices by the dealers, and then over a period of about 2 years, they would actually work and be trained. They're going to earn while they learn because they will be full-time employees. An apprentice is an employee, not an intern. And the idea is that the person stays on after that and is just continues to be a regular employee. So we believe the apprenticeship model, and there's something that goes with that, which was the thing I was at earlier in the week, the micro-credentials. We believe that those are ways that we fill this gap because we don't have the kind of formal education we need for many of these technical jobs. We also have a big problem with the people who are at kind of the foundation of the pyramid, our production workers. We don't do hardly any training for them. Many of our people where English is their second language are not put into career pathways. Here we are, we need thousands of people, and we don't do anything with getting the people who are right there in terms of the production workers into pathways that may lead into technical jobs, because we might have to do it in Spanish. Well, okay, let's do it in Spanish. I mean, what about this? Why can't we get this? We're on the cusp of a crisis, and we can't figure this out. Don't get me started. Blair County does a career day where they bring, I think it's every 9th grader or 10th grader, out to one of the big dairy farms that I've been a part of. Fantastic exercise to get people, you know, involved in seeing what it's about, because a lot of people never have set foot on a farm. Berks County does an agriculture career day where they bring all their high school CTE students. There are people who are doing things like this all over the Commonwealth, and we try to support them wherever we can. I'm almost at the end. No matter what you hear, I'm just going to say this. We don't have enough people working in agriculture today. We need those people who are the guest workers who come in from foreign countries who are here for maybe 9 months. We need them to fill the jobs that we can't fill otherwise. You know, we need people who come in with green cards and who, again, supplement our workforce. We need to have a system that's rational and that doesn't hunt people down and lock them up. Just me talking. That's not the department, that's just me. You can blame that on me. Here's the thing, and I guess this is where I'd like to end and open it up for some questions. You know, we talked about all these things, and they're all really important in terms of solving them. But I can guarantee you this. If we don't solve this workforce shortage, it is going to translate into an economic development crisis. Because one thing that I can tell you absolutely is if we don't have the people to do the job's not going to get done. And the job's going to go to where the people are. And you know what that means is that we need to begin thinking about workforce development as a economic development imperative. We need to really address that. And this is something that it can be in your wheelhouse. These are things you can do locally. These are things you can do with your school districts, with your career and technical education people. You can do it in collaboration with all these other counties around you. You are a part of this big food shed thing that's being done out of Pittsburgh. There are people who want to do this, and you know, part of what we need to do is get people together to do the right thing. So with that, I'll stop before my blood pressure, you know, gets up too much higher. So those are the 6 things that I went over today. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Think globally, act locally. That's why you're here today. I'll stop there. Questions you might have?
I raise produce down in Ligonier on a part-time basis. I have a full-time job. One of the problems that I see is when people come to me at the farmer's market, it's cheaper at Walmart, they say. And when we talk about jobs, I just want to throw this out there. It's not just about jobs, it's about living wage. Because we have a lot of working poor, including our guest workers who come here that go to Walmart and won't buy low. They're part of the system as well as consumers. So we have to collectively figure out how this system can make it more affordable so that mother of 4 that's going into Walmart, because it's cheaper, because we live in a global market that you can get tomatoes any time of year, is going there and not buying local stuff that we all know is grown in a better way. And so what I started doing, because I'm a small operator, it's not about money, it's about feeding people. That's what drew me to it, is that I make my prices affordable. And people that are used to high-end Pittsburgh-type prices, they, my God, this is cheap. Yeah, because you know what I'm making? Pennies per hour. but it's okay. It's all right. I do that for a reason. Just wanted to say that.
I mean, that's really good. I think part of what we have to do is figure out, so maybe we have to sell to those people in Pittsburgh that will pay the high end to help us afford to do what we need to do otherwise. This is what I was talking about segmenting the market and trying to figure out, where you kind of position yourself. But you're absolutely right. I mean, so, the big thing is, what do we do about that? That's the hard part.
Can you share, out of those 225 job categories for those 75,000 people, how many of them would be considered year-round positions or are seasonal?
I think the question was, how many of those 200-some jobs are actually year-round and how many are seasonal? What would you think? What do you think?
I think it's going to lend on the seasonal side higher.
Anybody else? What do you think? So just to this question of how many are seasonal and how many are year-round. So the answer is it's probably more year-round.
And if it's year-round, what's going to be an average hourly wage?
Well, the average, it's difficult. I think what you have to do is you have to break it down. I mean, because the average is going to be way higher than necessarily in agriculture production. Agriculture production tends to have lower wages. But when you get into the ag support kind of jobs, then you're into bigger bucks. Yeah, so trucking is huge. So part of what we have to think about is career pathways. So is there a way that people can start and break in some of those lower skill, lower wage jobs? We can't let them sit there. That's the problem. We need to move them up pathways so they can make a better wage. And again, who's doing that? How does that happen? I know an organic chicken processor. It's one of the largest in the state. He does it. He figured it out. He has a way to do it with a primarily Latino population. And so I know it can be done. It's just how do we get it? But your point's well taken that one of the problems that we have with agriculture jobs is so many of them are seasonal and so many of them are lower paying. And we have to, again, have a perspective on that, which is that, maybe we need to find ways to bring people in and then move them up. That's where I come from.
Do you think that the problem with not being able to secure workforce, and I'm not talking about foreign, I'm talking about local, is that we can't pay them enough money? I know a lot of kids I graduated high school with milk cows. Well, I mean, how many kids do you know in high school that are milking cows now? None. So, I mean, is it, and the problem with farm succession too, do these kids who are my age see that it's not sustainable? I mean, I went to college and I work off the farm. I went to college and I work off the farm because I'm not able to be employed at my home farm. There's not enough to go around. Yep. But also I don't make enough money to purchase my own farm.
So what do you think? Is it because of the money?
Probably. Definitely.
Part of it.
Yeah. Part of it's because the people won't give up control to it. Part of it's about embracing the next generation and opening up to encourage them to come back to the farm too. Yeah. And be creative with whatever you're growing.
I like creativity.
I'd like to just ask this question. It might sound crazy, but how do we get our young people, male and females, to get in an apprenticeship? And while you're in the apprenticeship, especially, let me just say this. You work in all 67 counties, plus West Virginia, plus Maryland. And to get in this apprenticeship, it only costs $25 to start, and that takes care of all your stuff, and you're taught everything, and it's 4 years on most of them. And I've been trying for 2 years to get young people into this. I've only gotten 2 to get in. Now, while they're in there, about the lowest paid while they're doing the apprenticeship is $34 an hour plus all your benefits. That's the carpenters. They also in steel workers, iron workers, bricklayers, and all this. And we're running out of people. Now, I've had companies calling me wanting to know where they can get workers. Yeah. Now, can we get this back into our schools for jobs, you know, to teach them? When I was going to school, we used to get these. And I've been working in this field for about 65 years. And in the last 2 years, I've only gotten 2 people to do that. And I've tried my best.
Yeah. So it's a big problem. You know, the worker shortage is everywhere. It's not just in agriculture.
Yeah.
You know, it's in construction. It's all over. It's in manufacturing. So, I mean, I think some of this is that we have to the young lady's question earlier, it's that we have to figure out why people aren't motivated to move into those career pathways. Are there some solutions here? For example, we're dealing a lot now with the idea of what's called a pre-apprenticeship, where you can actually begin your apprenticeship in high school.
Yes.
And then at the point where you graduate, you have credit toward your apprenticeship. Well, wouldn't that be a good idea? You know, couldn't we make that work and build a relationship between the high school student and the employer? These are the kind of things that we need to maybe look at in a new way. What about the idea of somebody who wants to build a farm getting hooked up with an apprenticeship so that the lender gives them a break on their loan interest so that at the end of their 3 or 4 year apprenticeship, they can buy into the farm that the person, you know, really does want to sell? Why couldn't we do that? Something like that. I mean, we need to come up with some new ideas. I think that's part of the problem is that, you know, people don't know about these opportunities that are out there, and we almost have to lead them right to it. And we have to have these bridge programs that it's just too much of a gap, and we have to find ways to help people bridge the gap and do it easy as possible. So I'm with you. I believe in apprenticeships. There's a lot of things happening in apprenticeship that's new, but I mean, so here's the thing. We knew this workforce shortage was coming. We all knew the baby boomers were going to retire. But here we are, right in the middle of it, and we haven't done anything. So, yeah.
Okay, we have time for just one more question, Scott.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, so related to this issue of apprenticeships, could you talk a little bit more about the kinds of requirements that the ag equipment people need for the purpose of getting people trained for their needs beyond apprenticeships, and what kind of facilities they need to do the kind of training that they need?
Well, first of all, with an apprenticeship, you actually do most of the training in the employer's place. So the facility issue is sort of taken care of. Now, there is what's called related training, which is your classroom and your online training that complements that. So the way that we have found to best organize this is that you get employers together to actually define what it is they need. So we had people who are service managers in ag equipment dealerships sit down to write the specs on what's required. And then we figure out, so what of that needs to be taught in the classroom and what can be done on the job. And then you divide that up, you find people that can do the related training, and you're off and running. We also have done what's called a competency-based apprenticeship, so that instead of it just being like a 4-year time-based kind of thing, like many of your building trades have, this allows you to take a test and you can move through it at your own pace. But the test is very defined, and it's based on these competencies that people have to achieve. So I mean, it can be done. We're working on another one right now for a horticulture technician. So somebody that can work in a greenhouse environment, in a landscape environment. I mean, there's a whole variety of applications for that. We're doing exactly the same process. Get the business people together, have them define the competencies, and then from that, we'll actually do the apprenticeship piece. I think maybe, so I'm going to hang around here, and I'll be happy to talk to any of you. I'm hoping to stay for lunch, too. Is that okay? So, and I'm going to be around. This is something that I appreciate the passion of this group, for it, and I appreciate your local leadership, for pushing this forward. My feeling is, yeah, I work for the State Department of Agriculture, but it's only going to get done if you do it. We'll help you in whatever way we can, but it's only going to get done if you do it. Think globally, act locally. Thank you.